This Hangout on air is live. Live, 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 all the way live. Week 16, all the way live. And, well, we've made it this far. And it's funny because I think that what most of us would say to most questions is you've made it this far with your instincts. So whatever we say, trust those instincts. But we have some great instincts on all medical and NFL matters this morning. Dr. Gene Bramall. We need to make sure that he's not a zombie. Anyone have a good zombie test? We need to make sure that Gene's not. Yeah, there it is. And Matt Waldman. And first of all, I hope everybody out there had a tremendous, tremendous holiday and is enjoying the time with friends, loved ones, the people important to you. And Matt Waldman, I just want to say, I want to spend next Christmas at your house when I see. What did you cook? Is that like a Chinese duck or something?
It was a pork shoulder. It was a bossam that David Chang makes at his restaurant Momofuku. So it's simple, but it's like a roasted pig shoulder with a pork shoulder with a bunch of different, dipping sauces and stuff that you eat with cabbage. It was fun.
Ooh.
Easy and fun.
Dipping sauces. And Gene, you're just somebody told me to do something, so I showed up and I'm doing it, right?
Me? Yes, me. Sure.
All right. Well, we're gonna ask you some questions about injury situations. All right, brother. A lot going on here. First and foremost, I think that we need to look at Doug Baldwin today because we started out with this idea that he was going to be a game time decision, but as we got closer, it sure seems like he's going to play. All signs are that he's going to play. So are we to the point in this all-important Week 16 where you basically set your lineups with Baldwin? I mean, you lower expectations a bit, but you don't sweat having to have a hedge, or otherwise if you have a 1 o'clock and a 4 o'clock player and there's a decent gap between that player and Baldwin, you just play Baldwin.
Yes, I would not play a 1 o'clock player I didn't trust more than Baldwin over Baldwin today. But I think if you had the option to do so, I would still roster a hedge. It's Week 16. It's too important not to do that. And yes, they allowed him to do a full practice on Friday, ostensibly to see whether or not he was able to respond well on Saturday and the Sunday. And we've heard nothing from the national or local media to suggest that he's not going to play at 4 o'clock. But he still has to go through pregame warmups. The weather isn't an issue. I don't think there's going to be a problem there. So I expect that he's a lot more probable than questionable, and I would think he's going to play. And it doesn't seem like a serious enough injury to where he'll have a likely in-game aggravation, but there's just no reason not to leave yourself an out this afternoon if you can find one. Now, if you're not able to do that, no, I'm not playing a lesser player at 1 o'clock due to concern for Baldwin at 4, but give yourself an option just in case something happens during warm-ups. It's a low percentage chance, but this is not a week you want to mess with.
So those options like a wide receiver would be Willie Snead and Alan Hearns and, I don't know, some sort of Rams receiver. Jermaine Kearse might be the most ideal one because he would get the biggest bump.
Yeah, shallow leagues, you might be able to find Lockett there too.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a few guys
I hope everybody that listens to this show, there's no Lockett on the waiver wire. Packers receivers, Cardinals receivers, Giants receivers, Stephon Diggs, Marvin Jones tomorrow night. Yeah, so there are options. Even if you have, and like Gene said, you have to have some sort of hedge. Matt, let's take two layers to this. One is if Baldwin is limited or out, who do you think benefits most? I mean, do you basically plug Lockett into the numbers you had projected for Baldwin?
No, I think it's spread out a little bit more. I just think that I think that people want to believe that Baldwin isn't as good as he is sometimes, and there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that lingering going on, but I think that Jermaine Kearse picks up the slack a little bit more, and so it becomes more of a split between Lockett and Kearse in that offensive scenario, as opposed to just being all on one guy.
Really quick, deep dynasty note. Really quick one, because they did call up Kason Williams, and I think you and I watched Kason Williams together, didn't we?
We did.
And I've been writing up the deep dynasty stashes and looking at practice squad guys. Just really quick, any RSP high points, 50 words or less kind of notes on Williams?
Sure, he's big. He can catch in traffic. He adjusts extremely well to the football. And the player he looked like before he had all these injuries, he looked a little bit like what Laquan Treadwell is looking like at Ole Miss. I don't think he's as good as Treadwell, but he was kind of a Michael Irvin type big possession receiver who can win the ball for you and get deep because of his size.
and if I remember correctly, a good blocker, but just adds that whole he has that whole physical edge to his game. Not a typical undrafted free agent in terms of ceiling. So another note on this Seattle game, and I want to turn to Gene first on this one because I know that if I'm spiraling off into some sort of delusional thought, Matt, you sometimes can help me and sometimes you can't. But Gene, you can always help me. Gene, Kristen Michael, I want to believe, man. I want to believe because it just feels right. It just feels right. And
This
St.
is
Louis
not
on
the week to believe.
this is not the week to believe.
I don't know. I mean, I realize that we are really scraping the bottom of the barrel at almost every position, quarterback, running back, and whatever. But I don't
So
know.
like if
I
you
mean,
were
what
let me
would you
put it in real
reliably
terms.
project as
Michael,
targets, as touchdowns?
well, 15 to 18 carries, at
Really?
least a
You think
50
he can
shot.
get that many?
He had 15 last week. They're playing St. Louis with Case Keenum. St. Louis is going to put up no fight whatsoever. I mean, I would let me put it this way: Seattle's going to get the number of carries they want to their running backs today. Like if they want 30 carries between Brown and Michael, they're going to get 30 carries. They're going to be able to do that. So there's the wet blanket. Here comes the wet blanket. So, but let me put it in some real terms here. Like Dallas is going to march out there with nothing. Dallas's offense looks like San Francisco's offense right now. Like, would you play McFadden or Michael to bring it home to the Dallas connection here?
Ugh. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is really
Or
not
like
to be,
Tim
to be
Hightower,
wishy-washy.
like Kristen Michael, or another player that we can put in this category is like Carlos Williams. Like are you looking towards these
So I would
upside
play
plays?
Hightower. I
So
would
you're
play
playing safe.
Hightower out of that group. McFadden. I don't know what to think about McFadden either. I would really, really like to trust Carlos Williams today. I think there's just enough of Mike Gillislee last week that makes me nervous. Now, is that because Williams' shoulder was enough of a bother still that that they were mixing in Gillislee, or is this really turned into a 50-50 situation? If I was convinced, as you are, that Williams was going to get the lion's share as Michael was in Seattle, I'd say Williams was a top 10 option easily today. But I don't know how you trust any of these situations, unfortunately.
Well, and one that actually cuts in favor of your point of view here is how it went for Alfred Morris last night, where we got the exact game script we wanted, and he still had like 17 for 49. Now, the other running backs that fall into this category today, be it Kristen Michael, Alfred Blue, Carlos Williams, I think are the big three, and maybe James White to an extent, more in PPR leagues. In other words, the idea being you didn't really count on or trust this player recently, or even in some cases the entire season. But if you look at what we have set up in week 16, you have to at least consider them. So here's my proposition, and then we'll move to Mr. Wet Blanket. My proposition is this. These boring but safe volume options like a Ronnie Hillman or a Darren McFadden or even a Frank Gore, a Matt Forte to an extent, a Chris Ivory who just has that low floor. These are plays to me that, yeah, they're going to get you 8, 9, 10, 11 points. I feel reasonably comfortable with that. I don't see a scenario where any of these guys give you 20 points. I don't see a scenario where Darren McFadden gets to 25 carries today. I don't see a scenario where Matt Forte is going to get over, say, like 70, 80, 90 total yards and score a couple of touchdowns or something like that. And clearly with Frank Gore, Ronnie Hillman, you haven't seen it. I can see scenarios where Alfred Blue has 100 yards and a touchdown. I can see a scenario where Kristen Michael has 150 yards and a touchdown. I can see a scenario where Carlos Williams has over 100 yards and a touchdown. He's done it on 12 carries. So, Matt, at this fork in the road that people might be at with their running back two, between that safe, boring volume play, Tim Hightower, as you nodded along, or the upside guy that it's coming together at just the right time, or maybe just the wrong time to get you to play them, where you at?
I'm with the boring guys this year. And the reason being is that none of those guys you mentioned, maybe 2 years ago, I would have said, oh, yeah, get them in the game, and they could just feast for your fantasy team and just go off. I don't see that. I don't see it anymore. I think that really the boring guys are more likely to get a touchdown for you because of the volume and the situations they're used in and the teams that they're with, who at least give you a fighting chance to move up and down and into the red zone. And I think that because of that, I would rather have the guy who's going to give me that floor of 9 points, because most likely in your season-long fantasy leagues, if you got there, you didn't get there with a bunch of or high floor guys, low ceiling guys. You probably have a lot of high ceiling guys already. So I would say to you, if you have like one player who's going to give you a high floor, but a low ceiling, just use that guy. Right. Go ahead and do that, because the rest of your guys you're counting on to give you that high scoring, and it's likely that you're playing another team like that. So if you end up going too much into the realm of the Alfred Blue could end up with 150 yards and a touchdown type of plays. If you end up with like 2 or 3 of those guys in your lineup, you may look at yourself on Monday and go, wow, I'm down by 20, whereas opposed to being up by 15.
So that's a terrific point, and I think we try to emphasize that you look at your whole lineup. And then another piece of the puzzle is we have 2 games, and we had some very bottom, top end of the range of outcomes for players. So you know what's up. I mean, if you're facing Jordan Reed and you're playing Will Tye, you know you need to make that up somewhere else. If you were facing Amari Cooper, you know that you play the Tim Hightower, take the layup. And otherwise, you can see and project the points you're going to be facing, projected points, and understand that. And I think you're right, Matt, but I do think that it's important. A lot of questions I'm getting this morning, I have this urge. Did you face Zach Ertz? Did you face Kirk Cousins? Did you play Derek Carr? Did you play Latavius Murray? These pieces of the puzzle, because the way these first 2 games went, a lot of players were at the high or low end of the range of outcomes, which should give you some more clarity on what you need to do. So, moving on, Gene, on that idea of ranges of outcomes and people having to make choices before they know everything that they wish they could know in hindsight. Drew Brees. How do we approach Drew Brees, and especially if we're looking at him, weighing him against streamer types like Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, these mid-level guys? I would say Sam Bradford and Kirk Cousins, but they both, if you played them, you're probably right. Maybe Johnny Manziel, maybe Matt Ryan, even though Carolina sits at home. How are we feeling about Drew Brees today?
I would feel terrible about Drew Brees, except that it's Jacksonville, and I feel like New Orleans at home, even though Jacksonville hasn't been a terrible defense, they've still been giving up lots of points. There have been shootouts involved. If it wasn't this particular matchup at home, I'd say avoid Brees altogether. He's going to play in a special shoe. They're going to tape his foot up. Even that, it's just a hard injury to brace effectively. So he's going to be limited in the pocket. Expect them to do some max protect, and they're probably not going to move him around all that much. Not that they do that anyway, but he's going to be uncomfortable sliding in the pocket. It's going to be hard for him to plant and push off. There's a big risk of inaccuracy. There's a risk that if he has an in-game tweak or an aggravation or just doesn't like how it feels, that he's going to come out early. I wrote in the column this morning that I would only consider him if I was being very contrarian in a GPP lineup, or if I felt like I was a big underdog and my second option really wasn't all that good. I didn't have a whole lot of upside there. But if I felt like I had another option that could get me 2 or 3 touchdowns, I would probably use it today, both from a floor and an upside perspective. Maybe that option doesn't have the 4 or 5 touchdown upside that Brees does, but I think that there's a low percentage chance that Brees does what he's been doing earlier in the month and in November. I just don't see that happening because of this injury. And he may be adamant that he's going to play and try to play through it, but it's something that they're going to have to manage him through, and it's not going to be an easy process. It's hard to put a percentage chance on how likely it is that he'll come out early or that he won't be able to drive the ball downfield, and that's what he's been making most of his bones on over the past couple of months, in the past few weeks, is getting the ball downfield to Cooks and getting the ball downfield to Snead and the other guys, Coleman a little bit too. Watson's a little bit dinged up. I just think overall this is a setup for disaster for Brees. So unless if you're a favorite or if it's a close game, I would lean toward avoiding him. But I understand if your gut is telling you this matchup is too good to miss. Just a lot of risk in using him today.
So someone says Doc Teddy Bridgewater against the Giants.
I would play Bridgewater.
Like when like these are no hesitation kind of calls. If you had to go down to like Matt Ryan against Carolina.
That's where it gets tough. Is I don't know that Ryan has 1 or 2 touchdowns. I don't even know if he has a single touchdown upside today.
He didn't last time he played
Carolina.
Carolina.
So I would probably hope, because if Brees can get through a few quarters healthy and the game stays closer, it does become a shootout, there's still 3 or 4 touchdown upside there. I just think it's a much smaller percentage chance than we would have said a couple of weeks ago. Before this injury, we would have said Brees was a top 2 option probably this week,
Right.
based on this matchup home and everything else. But this is, you saw it last week, whereas unlike Carson Palmer, he was able to get through that injury without too much difficulty. Brees just could not move in the pocket at points last week, and you were wondering when they were going to take him out. Now, it kind of bounced back.
He still had 3 touchdowns and well over 300 yards.
Bounced back in the fourth quarter. But, again, we talk about this with high ankle injuries, and I know that's not what this is, but even with a chronic injury like a plantar fascia thing, when you get an aggravation of that, sometimes it takes a couple hours for the swelling and the pain and the stiffness to set in. And how Brees felt on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was a whole lot different than how he was feeling in the third and fourth quarter last week. So he's probably had cortisone shots. Again, I wouldn't completely take him off the board. And if I needed somebody to throw 3 or 4 touchdowns and I didn't have Bridgewater or somebody like that, then yeah, I would still play Brees. But just this is an injury that's going to keep him a low floor today.
Really quick, Gene, this is speculation, total speculation, so we won't even qualify it any further than that. But do you think that this is more Drew Brees and everything he's done for the franchise and everything he is to the city, he gets to decide how he goes out? Because there's already word from Ian Rappaport this morning, like he's got a $30 million cap number. He's going to have to take a discount. Like we might be seeing the end of Drew Brees as a Saint. Because if we knew that, then we would be that much more cautious. Or do you think the Saints are still being prudent about this, allowing him to play?
No, I think it's his decision for the most part. Unless he was so injured that the medical staff said you just can't go. But this isn't that type of injury. Even if he gets a larger tear, that's not necessarily going to set him out longer term. If he gets an aggravation, he just doesn't play anymore this year, and that's what was up in the air earlier in the week anyway. So if he wants to play, if he can throw the ball at all, then what's their other option? There really isn't one. So he's going to be out there playing. It's just a question of how difficult it's going to be for him to perform the duties as he usually would, and I think it's going to be a little bit more. I think we're more likely to see the Drew Brees of the end of the second quarter and early third than the late third and fourth. But as he's shown, either one of those are possibilities.
Matt, you endorsed Tim Hightower on the boring front, but Tim Hightower is a little easier to endorse whether or not we think Drew Brees is going to be Drew Brees, because, well, if he's not Drew Brees, that probably means more Tim Hightower. What about Willie Snead? What about Ben Watson? What about Brandon Cooks? What about Brees? I mean, how would you approach this situation if you had hard calls to make that circulated around the New Orleans offense today?
Stay away from New Orleans. That's what my thoughts would be. I mean, overall, because I know that Gene was talking about Brees and how he looked on Sunday. I'll tell you what I thought when I looked out on Sunday. I'm like, this looks like this is going to be troubling him for the rest of the season. I mean, you watch him and he looked like one of those horses, like constantly stamping his hoof, like throughout the entire evening. And you have to, if Gene says it's only gotten worse as a result of that, then I would have to look at that and just say, look, I don't care about that Drew Brees can throw 4 to 6, 7 touchdowns at any given time. We've never seen Drew Brees actually have to be Brett Favre either. So right. It's not, it's a different scenario. So then when they put another quarterback in, who's going to get those? Do we really know? Do we know who those players are he's going to favor? Does he favor Brandon Coleman more because he practiced with them more earlier this summer? Does he favor Tim Hightower because he's a checkdown king, and that means that Tim Hightower and Ben Watson become bigger guys? Or is it Josh Hill becomes a guy that has more rapport? There's too many questions to answer this week at the most pivotal time. No, don't even bother. If Griffin comes in or whoever at McCown comes in and throws, 5
Matt
touchdowns.
Flynn. It's Matt Flynn. What if I told you it was Matt Flynn?
Yeah, if Matt Flynn comes in and and they pull Devery Henderson off the street and they can reunite their old LSU ties. I don't even think they were playing together at that time. But
they had to get Jamarcus Russell for that one.
Yeah, no. I would rather find somebody else.
On the other side of that matchup, Blake Bortles. If you were doing Bortles, Brady, or Bortles, Rodgers, these choices, Bortles, Ryan Fitzpatrick, there's some tough calls. Bortles, Matthew Stafford. Are you breaking ties in favor of Bortles?
Yes. I'm heavy on Bortles this week. I'm pounding the table for Mr. Bortles, and I know that my buddy Eric Stoner, that
he's full
we,
on in. It's so
our
beautiful.
Our Twitter thing with Eric Stoner was like 2 weeks ago against Indy. I tweeted him at halftime. I was like, dude, you need to wake up. Like,
right.
Wake up, because you need to wake your buddy up. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I need some coffee and a cigarette, and I'll be fine, and he was.
I think that Stoner, by the way, coming soon to RSP blog near you, more work from Eric Stoner. It's choice cuts. I remember Eric Stoner tweeted out a couple of weeks ago, and this is Jags Twitter. There was a little roundabout, or someone said, I root for this team because of Twitter. Like, that's the Jags. I totally root for the Jags because of Jags Twitter. And I think Eric tweeted out something like, I feel sorry for all the teams that don't have a good quarterback. I already forget what that feels like.
It's a good situation, and I mean the Saints. If you look at their recent stats, if you look at it from a receiver perspective, and you look at their game stats, you may go, "Ooh, this doesn't look all that great in the past 3 to 5 weeks." But what you may notice is the touchdown total seems to be pretty high, and the quarterback totals seem to be pretty high. And you also have to understand those past 3 to 5 weeks also include teams that haven't been very good on offense or are fairly one-dimensional in their passing games. So if you go back a little bit further with teams that actually have multiple receiving threats, you can hear that cash register ringing. And I think that that's what you're going to hear today.
So just tie up, and we may get the doc back, but he has an assignment, of course. Gene's saving the world. Y'all don't realize that like he drops in to help us with fantasy football in between saving the world. But just to sum up some more Dr. Gene things, in case you don't know, Amendola, Edelman out, Tyler Eifert out, LaShawn McCoy out, Jonathan Stewart out, Alshon Jeffrey, Des Bryant, TJ Yeldon very, very unlikely to play. Andre Ellington will play, but play a change of pace role. Brandon LaFell, not much specifics, but generally it sounds like he's going to play. I would probably stay away from him anyway. Carson Palmer's going to play use him as you normally would. Use Delaney Walker as you normally would. And there's risk with Adrian Peterson, but come on. If you have Adrian Peterson, you're playing Adrian Peterson. I mean, that's just, come on. You. Okay.
Please.
So let's start talking about some games. Well, actually, let me tie up one last loose end on that New Orleans-Jacksonville game. Denard Robinson. If you got some calls that you're breaking ties between Robinson and other backs. Robinson and Todd Gurley, for instance. There's a chance for you to talk about Todd Gurley if you want today, too, because he's going up to Seattle.
Yeah, and I think that you have to look at really the game logs, and I think that really helps you out a little bit, because with New Orleans, they gave up 148 yards to Joique Bell and Amir Abdul.
What Detroit running game? I'll be right back.
Yeah, they gave up that. Then they also gave up with Doug Martin. They gave up 81 yards on 11 carries and a touchdown. Jonathan Stewart, 82 yards and a touchdown. Alfred Blue, 77 yards and a touchdown. So what you're looking at here is a situation where the running game, even on teams that are a middling running game, are still getting good production from their backs. So to me, TJ Yeldon offers a little bit more upside, but because he's not available, this running game becomes kind of a middling running game. But 80 yards and a touchdown out of Denard Robinson, I like that, compared to Todd Gurley, where, as much as Todd Gurley offers you that shot at 3 touchdowns and 150 yards, he's playing a tougher Seattle defense. And when you look at what Seattle's given up recently, I think that's where you really have to, that makes your decision a little bit easier, because yeah, I know that the Ravens and the Cleveland Browns can't run the ball, so looking at them and saying that they combined have maybe 100 yards out of 4 backs in 2 weeks isn't much, but they held Adrian Peterson to 8 carries for 18 yards and Jerick McKinnon for 4 for 18, and DeAngelo Williams only had 29 yards and a touchdown. So when we go back to even that, I mean, the best that they've done was a month ago when Andre Ellington and Chris Johnson had a combined 119 yards and a touchdown on 30 carries.
Right.
30 carries.
30 carries. That's the thing. So in some ways, the Gurley decision is complicated where it should be simplified, because a few weeks ago we came to this point with Gurley against Detroit, and we said tough run defense. The offense can't get the engine to turn over. So as much as we love Gurley, you've been watching the trends coming into this game. Why would you play him? And then, of course, he had a tremendous game. Now, we're at the same point. You see the way it's trending. You've been watching Case Keenum. But this is different because it's Seattle and Seattle.
Yeah.
And how can you picture – I suppose the only theory here is it's just divisional.
Here's my take. This is the one guy that I will have as the exception to your high ceiling thing. If you're choosing between Alfred Blue and Todd Gurley, or Kristen Michael and Todd Gurley, there's somebody who is in a timeshare situation, even as the
Bilal Powell.
Yeah, Bilal Powell. Well, yeah. Somebody who you don't know if they have an established role in a timeshare as an injury substitute versus Todd Gurley, who you know is likely to get enough carries to do something with. You take Todd Gurley. You take Todd Gurley because he gives you that high ceiling and he gives you those opportunities.
And I have him as my number 9 or 10 running back this week because of how the Detroit game went. Because I feel like maybe I overreacted to the Detroit game, and that's making me underreact to the Seattle game. Gene, and I did a quick summary because you were out saving the world, and now you're back, Gene, of the other injury. But those were the two big ones. The two big ones are Baldwin and Brees, really. Would you agree? I mean, there's not really many other injury situations this week with a lot of nuance and treacherous territory to navigate.
I think there's probably a little bit of nuance with Adrian Peterson, depending on what Green Bay does. But yeah, I think the only way you're right, the nuance would be, should I have not played him if I find out something happens during the game? I think, barring something where we hear with clarity that there's a chance he may not play if Green Bay should lose, or this or the other. But I think, especially with all of what we've just been talking about over the last 15 minutes with the uncertainty at the running back position, that you put him in your lineup and you hope that it's is a low risk high ankle sprain is what we think it is, and that the full Friday practice and him chasing a rushing title and all those other sort of things carry the day, rather than worrying over whether or not he may have an in-game slight aggravation, in which case the team is definitely going to be a little bit more cautious with him. But yeah, I'm rolling with Peterson today. I'm just getting a few questions about him.
And I mean, it's David Johnson and D'Angelo. I mean, if you only start 2 and it's David Johnson, D'Angelo Williams, Peterson, I can see saying put Peterson on the bench. In a PPR, I could see Peterson behind Freeman. And I guess the really tough call is if you had to choose 2 or 3 of a group, and the cutoff was Peterson against Doug Martin. Once you get past Doug Martin, then you're to the running backs like Denard Robinson and Gurley and Charkandrick West and so on, where that's not a tough call at all. But what might be a tough call, we were talking about before you drop back in, Gene, is Todd Gurley this week. Just basic guidance for people who have to make a tough call where they can feel it in their gut that it's really close between Gurley and another flex or Gurley and another running back too. Where are you at?
I would probably lean towards playing Gurley, if only because we've seen over the past couple of weeks, even knowing that he's not going to get an elite number of touches, that any of those touches can be broken, and if the Rams get inside the 5 or 10 yard line, he's going to be the guy that has the best chance to score. So if you're debating between Gurley and another flex option, you go with the guy that has the most talent and has the chance to break some longer issues, knowing that the floor is not there, because you're debating guys that don't have a great floor anyway.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I agree with that, and that's my take, and that's the take of my rankings. But I just feel a sense of almost certainty that he's going to end up at like 9 carries for 23 yards and 2 catches for 12 yards, and it's going to be the early third quarter, and it's going to be 35-3, and that's just going to be it. Let's move on to Indy and Miami. And Matt, in these games between two teams basically going nowhere, I suppose Indy still has a mathematical chance to win, like as much as the Giants had a mathematical chance to win the division. There's a couple players in here that, again, I'll cast in terms of just if you have to break ties between this player and another player, which way are you leaning? And the toughest player, Lamar Miller, man. What do you do with Lamar Miller this week? Because he could be a season winner, and he could be a player that you say, why did I play him? If I had just played Tim Hightower, if I had just played somebody that I knew was going to get 15 to 20 touches, Ronnie Hillman, I would have won. Which side are you going to err on?
My first choice in a DFS lineup this week before I changed it was Lamar Miller. And then I looked at the scenario in the recent weeks and realized, let's slowly back away from Lamar Miller and close the door behind me, and hope he doesn't, hope I don't wake up the monster there. But I think that if you're in a tough spot and you have to consider Lamar Miller, I would do so. I know that Jay Ajayi certainly is going to get some opportunities there if any running back gets the opportunities. But I think that Indianapolis's defense, the combination of their defense, their offense that's kind of like that car that you have to like hit the dashboard a certain combination of times for it to start, and you never know based on the weather that week whether or not it is. I think Lamar Miller is a dangerous play, but he's a play that if you have to make that dangerous call, I'd go with him because he's just too good.
Gene, do you agree with that? And then on that train, other players in this game like T.Y. Hilton, Jarvis Landry, even Frank Gore. And Frank Gore's another one. Like, I have to project him with 18. Y'all know how I feel about Frank Gore. I love Frank Gore, but if you've been watching him, I think Cecil put it well. Like, just watch the way he's getting up from his touches. You know he's going to get 15 to 20 touches, probably for 60 or 70 yards, and maybe a touchdown. So when you look over this game, I mean, obviously for DFS, Gene, this is a big stay away. Ooh. But if you're weighing options from this game in your redraft championship lineup, thoughts?
I can see a ceiling for Lamar Miller. I don't think I can see a ceiling for the other players in this game. I think you can tell yourself a story that beat up Matt Hasselbeck on the road against a Miami defense that, again, we've been struggling to get a read on for quite some time and can definitely not play well. I think you tell the story that Matt Hasselbeck's more likely to struggle than anything else, and I would probably stay away from the receivers if I could. But by the same token, you can tell yourself a story that Lamar Miller against the Indianapolis defense could break out a bit at home, and even if he's in a little bit of a timeshare situation, could still get 12 to 18 touches, as we're thinking about Michael and all these other guys, and do well with those touches. We've seen Miller do that in the past. So you can see the ceiling there more so than I think at least you can see ceiling in other places, Gore included.
We have a lot of interesting situations this week where, again, as I talked about with these running backs, we're potentially playing players this week, Matt, that we have not played all season, that we haven't looked to a shelter or someone that we trust in our fantasy lineup. Let's talk about Tampa and Chicago. What about Zach Miller? And this is a guy that I can't even say to you, what do you have on him in the RSP? Because he was an option quarterback in Nebraska, Omaha. So, I mean, how much is there to learn about somebody as a receiver? But he has been a go-to player, 5 for 85 and a touchdown, 6 for 57 since Martellus Bennett, our favorite black unicorn, went on IR. Is it too far? I think I have him as number 7 or 8 in my tight end rankings this week, Matt. I mean, I'm playing him over options like, Jason Witten. I mean, that's not hard. I really, where I have him dead in a dead heat with Travis Kelce. And honestly, when people are asking me Kelce or Miller, I find myself wanting to say Miller. I find myself wanting to say Miller even over the likes of Julius Thomas, Delaney Walker, who's a little banged up and not the same with Zach Mettenberger. Like Ben Watson, we talked about with the issue with Drew Brees. Is this too aggressive when you probably haven't played Zach Miller the entire season?
I think it's fairly aggressive, but I see the reason behind it. I would probably hold the phone on those guys. I'd probably put him behind all of those guys you mentioned, but still up there. Whereas if you're thinking Will Tye or Miller, yeah, you go with Miller there. I just think that, yeah, Tampa Bay's defense probably is also amenable to some of that, so that might be a big reason why you go that route. But I think that we have to look at the St. Louis game where he really blew up and understand that some of that was just god-awful tackling, and the stats were inflated to an extent for what you should expect. And yes, that could happen with Tampa Bay too, but I don't think that's really his game. His game in context is near the red zone. It's kind of how would I put it? Maybe a Zach Ertz plus or Brent Selleck plus type of game.
I want to just barge in here and say, what did Zach Ertz have last night? 13 for 122. Like that, I think is in the realm of possibilities for Zach Miller today, because of no Alshon Jeffrey, and we'll see about Eddie Royal. But I think to bring up Zach Ertz is a terrific name because that's the kind of player he'll be for Jay Cutler today. I expect. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's perfect.
So, Gene, really quick, DFS wide receiver power rankings this week. Number 1, of course, Antonio Brown. Number 2, Mike Evans.
Yeah, if you think that Tampa Bay will throw the ball and not get ahead so far, I mean, is this the week that we
22
see,
pass attempts for Winston? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think that's the concern. But without Vincent Jackson there, with Austin Seferian-Jenkins still sort of struggling to get back into the flow of the offense, all of the targets are going to get funneled there, and I think the matchup bodes well for Evans. I don't think there's anybody on the other side of the ball that's going to shut him down. So in terms of pure upside, yeah, I agree that he's probably the number 2 player, but there's lots of other guys just based on a salary perspective that you might want to put in there. I'm going to just stack all of the Pittsburgh guys.
All 3 of the Steelers. All 3 of them. Yeah. No, totally.
You wouldn't do that, but I mean,
No! See, you say that, Gene.
I would.
In like 10 hours, you're going to look, and the number 1 DFS lineup is going to be like that super stack lineup. It's totally going to happen. Or maybe Dan
Roethlisberger has another 7-touchdown game. But
well, and this is Narrative Street, so we're transitioning now to that game. This is Narrative Street, Matt. But you know this stuff because you look up to AFC North football. You put it on the pedestal it deserves to be on. With this rivalry and the history of this rivalry and Ryan freaking Mallett at quarterback, okay? If you're the Steelers and you can go into Baltimore's house and you can put 50 on them, you're damn well going to try to put 50 on them. Am I overreading this? Am I overthinking this?
No, not at all. That's exactly what's going to happen.
You're going to desecrate
DFS,
their course.
If you're looking for a cheap lineup for the Steelers defense, are you kidding me?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Ryan Mallett and the Steelers defense. The fact that Ryan Mallett had to come out and say, well, we'll keep with narrative since we're going Narrative Street. Yeah. We'll stay on it in the neighborhood. And the narrative of Ryan Mallett, I got humbled. Let me tell you something. The fact that he even realizes he got humbled and had to say that tells you that he probably still has at least another dozen pies to eat before he's even remotely close to what he should be at so that he can begin working with that $1 million arm that he has and that 2-cent head of his in terms of his maturity. I hope he grows up. Kerry Collins had a 2-cent head for a while, and he turned into a fine player, and that's good. So, I respect most of the players in this game. I just think that Ryan Mallett has not done much to earn a lot of respect from his teammates. There was I can't go into the details of the rumor, but I think we heard a rumor at one point with Houston that there was no way he was going to be the starter to begin the season because of a certain dynamic of how he looked at
And I'll
players.
just come right out and say that, that he was never accepted by the team. He was never embraced in the locker room. I don't know that he really tried to be. And
the coach tried to shoehorn him in there, and it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So this guy should be much better, and he's not. This is a day, and he is not good against pressure. So, and the Steelers love pressure. This is like a
car crash.
To the
you can't look away from
situation.
it.
Oh,
you
yeah.
Can't look away. You can't look away. And that's why, really, the car crash is me blooming the Steelers because all they need to do is just take care of business against Baltimore and Cleveland, and a Baltimore with Ryan Mallett. Really quickly on the fantasy side of Ryan Mallett. Javorius Allen checkdowns, not so much. No.
Probably not. No, I think you're going to see bullets to receivers who can't handle it.
I'm picturing Ryan Mallett on like the accuracy course, like throwing the 5-yard check down and like taking the head of the target, like the little wide receiver target.
I could imitate, but I don't want to put holes in my wall back here.
Right, but Kamar Aiken, who's been very, very steady for us. Still, and against the Steelers defense, they're prone to lapses, breakdowns. You're probably going to see Mallett throw 45 times, if not more. Kamar Aiken still thumbs up.
Yeah, I think so because at least they'll go deep a few times, and he can get open deep. So
Marcus Wheaton, one of those players. Like if you need a surprise 20 or 25 point game, this is definitely someone you want to look to. Moving right along here, and where I was gonna go next from the wide receiver power rankings. I'll go back to Eugene on the wide receiver power rankings for DFS. And this is something where you can also weigh in with the interrelated situation and your medical perspective on it. Number 1, Antonio Brown. Number 2, and this is just, throw salaries out the window and things like that. Number 2, Mike Evans. I think, and I'm not saying he's my number 3 ranked wide receiver. Let me look and see exactly where I have him ranked. But you know what? He's my number 5 ranked wide receiver. Golden Tate.
Okay.
Like when I say
I'm not. I can't get. I should be more behind Golden Tate than I am, I guess is what I'm saying. Is I
Calvin
think that
Johnson. Is there something about Calvin Johnson that's
so that's where I'm going with that. Is yes, there is. I think there is something going on with Calvin Johnson's ankle, and as long as we see him continue to not practice fully, continue to not separate on the field, continue to see his targets decrease as they have, whether or not they go to Golden Tate or Eric Ebron with Pettigrew out or whatever you feel like may be happening there, I think you have to consider Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate is one of those guys. The inconsistency gets to you after a little bit, but the inconsistency has not been there. He's been the exact opposite of that over the past month. The targets have been there. The red zone opportunities have been there. He's been healthy and productive. So I can see where Golden Tate would be a top 5 option. It's just something in my brain that cringes when that's offered as a possibility. But yes, with this particular matchup, the San Francisco matchup, you're at home. Again, the concern is how long is Stafford going to throw the ball because San Francisco isn't likely to score. Maybe the Detroit defense is the one that puts most of the points on the board rather than the offense too. So, but this is the time of year where if you're looking for upside plays, guys like Tate and Wheaton need to be at the top of the list.
Matt, are you going back close to that burner, that Calvin Johnson burner? If you survived him last week, are you going to touch that again? Are you going to get close to that this week?
Yeah, I am actually. If it's, I still look at him as kind of a wide receiver 3. That's why I put him there all season long. Is you can't ignore the upside. You can't ignore the occasions where they get him in there. But there are going to be weeks like last week, and sometimes you just have to go back to the well.
So, do we also go back to the well on A.J. Green?
Yes.
Now, Denver's not San Francisco, man.
That's right, and so you understand that, but also Denver also gives up big plays to big play wide receivers, and if you look at the receivers on their game logs of Football Guys, and you see who they've given up points to, they're guys who A.J. Green is either as good as or better than. And A.J. McCarron, I know, you're talking about a guy who wants to be compared to Brett Favre, and it's like, it's like a smart car wanting to be compared to a Ferrari, but it's a scenario where A.J. McCarron can throw the ball deep reasonably well, kind of Andy Dalton well. And he can throw the ball short. He just doesn't have an intermediate game, which is why he's been a backup at best, and he's an aspiring backup really at this stage of the game. I think that he can throw the ball deep well enough that Green is going to get some shots, and Denver's going to. I think it's natural for corners to look at a guy like McCarron and probably be a little bit skeptical that he's going to be able to do it until he's done it. And I think that McCarron will take those shots with Green. And Green is a guy who you often see really either in the short game a lot or you see him in the deep game. And I think that it fits well with what McCarron does. So I'd take the chance with him, yes.
Gene, let's go back, all the way back to Week 16 of last year. You might remember, by the way, that Zach Ertz had 15 for 115 in that week. He 13 for 122 for an encore.
No wonder people like him in preseason.
Yeah, right. He comes on just in time. So another player that went the opposite direction just in time last year was A.J. Green against Denver in Week 16. He got banged up in that game and gave us a goose egg. Now, what gives us pause beyond Denver's prodigious defense is that he had a bruised back last week, caught one pass. They got him out of the game in the third quarter. They admitted that the plan was as soon as they could get him out of the game, they were going to take him out of the game. Now, he is on track to play on Monday night. There's a lot of factors going against A.J. Green here. Are you talking people into playing him? Are you saying, hey, if you're not feeling it with A.J. Green this week, that's valid? And if you are looking at players, I'm going to look at some names that I have close to A.J. Green in my rankings. Your John Brown, Michael Floyd's, maybe a Travis Benjamin, even your low ceiling options like a Randall Cobb, like a Larry Fitzgerald. What do we think about this? Give us some idea of how much this back injury could affect him? And let's remember, Denver's corners, Denver's defense they're going to zero. This is me and my narrative street take. But you're zeroing in. There's one way that Denver can possibly lose this game, other than Brock Osweiler having a meltdown. It's for A.J. Green to make crazy plays downfield that A.J. Green can make. So you belt him, even to the point of taking 15-yard penalties. Am I overthinking this one?
No, probably not. There's the back injury is a minimal concern only because the weather sounds like it's going to be pretty cold in Denver. It may be in the teens and in low 20s. And if he has any difficulty getting warmed up or takes a hit and gets some back spasms around the area that's been bruised, it could be a little bit of an issue for him. I think the reason I'm concerned about A.J. Green is yes, A.J. McCarron may be able to throw a deep ball okay, but the Broncos pass rush, what's been a Cincinnati offensive line that's struggled to protect quarterbacks over the past couple of weeks more than it was earlier in the year. That's the concern, is are they going to be able to give McCarron time and comfort to be able to get the ball downfield to Green, even if he is able to beat Talib, Harris, whoever it may be, outside on him there. So I think you're going to see, in a PPR league, I'd be a little bit more comfortable with Green than otherwise, because I think you're going to see short drops, short passes. You're going to see a lot of the Denver passing game with Peyton Manning, probably with McCarron, where they're going to do a lot of those bubble screens and scheming ways to do quick slants and that sort of thing in the hopes that Green can separate quickly and make a lot of catches. So I think we're more likely to see 8 for 80 than 5 for 160 and a touchdown or two out of Green. I wouldn't necessarily shy away from him, but I don't think the ceiling is there. I think the shots that you see the Bengals take downfield are going to be fewer and far between than what we saw with Dalton or even what we've seen from McCarron in the past couple of weeks, just simply because I don't know that they're going to have the time to do it.
Okay, let's run through. We'll get to some lightning round stuff here because I just want to touch on some key players and get some thoughts from y'all as we wind down Week 16. This will be, by the way, our last live Sunday morning hangout of the season. We won't be back for Week 17, but we'll be back with lots of hangouts and shows. And know that next week we're going to have our preview. Cecil and I will do the Week 17 preview, and then of course we're going to have our Deep Dynasty and playoff previews and things like that. Okay, let's run through this. And really, we're just kind of talking like hot, lukewarm, cold, cool, where we're at on players this week. So, Matt, Travis Benjamin against Kansas City.
Hot.
And I would agree with that. I mean,
hot because Seattle is just real quick ones. Hot because Seattle's defense is a tough defense last week, but Manziel to Benjamin is good money, and I would say that Kansas City Chiefs defense is weak when it comes to giving up big plays.
Well, and Gene Houston out, Hawley, I mean, with that thumb, is not going to be the same if he does play. So we're not looking Kansas City's defense the same way we've been looking at them in previous weeks. Go ahead.
I just don't see the upside there necessarily. I still think this is Kansas City's probably going to play well on defense. I just don't know that the big play upside that we've seen over the past month is still there.
So Travis Benjamin, definitely a player that could come through for you with Johnny Manziel. And what you like about Manziel is even in a garbage time scenario, he's going to keep going for it. Gene, same thing, like hot, lukewarm, cool, cold, Charkandrick West with Spencer Ware back.
I like him a lot. I don't know if I'd go all the way to hot because Spencer Ware might vulture some goal line carries or so, but I think there's a lot of upside with West today. Matt,
Tom Brady.
Hot. Because I just think that, warm. I'm going to go to warm because I certainly think that he's capable of giving you a solid day and multiple touchdowns. But, this is a team that probably needs at least to be able to, over the next couple of weeks, they're just going to get ready. So I don't think it's going to be I don't think the competitive need to have a huge scoring week is going to be there. I think it's going to be a mid-range scoring game anyway.
James White.
I don't know. I'm betting the under on the Jets Patriots today. I just don't see a lot of points here. James White in a PPR league, yes. I think that game comes down to can the Patriots get the ball to Gronk often enough to move the chains, or does New York change its game plan a little bit if they're able to get out of a little bit of lead on the Patriots and allow them to move the ball a little bit more? But I think that Jets defense has been playing pretty good over the past few weeks, and I don't see a whole lot of options for Brady overall. So I guess I would say lukewarm on White, if for no other reason than nobody ever knows what Belichick is going to do and how things are going to play out.
I really like James White this week because of no Danny Amendola, no Julian Edelman. I don't think Keyshawn Martin is going to be beating Buster Screen all that much. So James White's the pressure release valve, and it's the Jets, so they're not going to run Steven Jackson and Brandon Bolden and Joey Josefa up the middle 30 times. So what's the point of that? We know, I mean, there's certain things that we can say we never know what Belichick's going to do, but he's not going to go right at the strength of a defense. and that includes the outside receivers. So Brandon LaFell. So it's like you start crossing guys off. You're like, it's Gronk and it's White basically, and White's been playing very, very well. Matt, if you have both Jets running backs, Powell and Ivory, and I'm not even going to qualify this with PPR or anything like that. It's Powell over Ivory this week.
Yeah, ain't that crazy? I mean,
Another RSP favorite.
It's an
He looks
RSP
good.
favorite.
Really quick, he looks better. I mean, in your mind's eye, and you projected how well he could possibly play in the NFL, I would say it's clear that this last couple of weeks, he looks better than that most optimistic projection.
No, that's what I saw. I mean, I had him rated highly. That's why it's
true.
funny.
Always your number 3 running back.
Yeah, so that's what I saw as a guy who's going to be able to break tackles, who's going to have some ability to score from like 30. You know, you can get you scores from 25, 35 yards. Who can break a couple of tackles? Who looks, you know, that's the player that I saw when I watched him, and it's been what 5-6 years now. Right. So now he finally starts to look like that. It would be interesting to see what happens in the offseason. I doubt he's going to become the starter, but you never know.
He's so good, though. I mean, what I'm seeing is he was, I think, a little bit more of a one-speed player earlier in his NFL career, and now he's got something extra, and combined with that tackle-breaking ability. Moving right along, Gene, is this another Tyrod to Sammy Watkins week?
I think it's very possible. I don't know how likely I would say it is, but where else are they going to go with the ball unless Carlos Williams really starts playing well? I think Tyrod Taylor is going to look to get the ball downfield a little bit more often, and Sammy Watkins has been playing very well.
Yeah, no Woods, no Clay there. So it just almost by process of elimination, just stay away from the Cowboys. I feel like I should be moving Darren McFadden lower in my rankings, to be honest. Looking at the Carolina side, and Matt, you were the first, of course. I start a lot of sentences with Matt, you were the first. You were really the first one this year to say Ted Ginn's going to be very valuable. Ted Ginn's worth picking up. Ted Ginn's worth playing. And we've now seen him string together multiple touchdown weeks. And this is kind of like this Doug Baldwin. You know, with Doug Baldwin, you don't feel like you're on a high wire because Doug Baldwin's going to get a decent number of short targets. And Doug Baldwin also is not prone to just cold dropping balls that are as easy as if someone walked down the field and handed it to him. So are you trusting Ted? And again, I'm just going to toss names out. You don't have to commit. But you know, some of the guys you might be weighing Ted Ginn, on the other hand, against players like Emmanuel Sanders, Brandon Cooks with this Brees stuff. Again, you're Calvin Johnson and AJ Green. Or am I getting too crazy here?
No, you're not getting too crazy at all. The thing is that you have to understand your mindset for why you're playing Ted Ginn and why Ted Ginn works. And it's not because he's a great wide receiver. It's because he's the only name in town. It's kind of like Kelvin Benjamin last year, and you were probably the reason why I like Ted Ginn. Was your logic last year about Kelvin Benjamin, which is, look, Kelvin Benjamin's going to drop passes. He's going to run bad routes. He's going to look like a high school player jumping to the NFL at times. But he's the only big man they've got who can get deep. So Cam Newton is going to just throw him the ball early, often, and always, and just keep going back to the well with him. And if that happens, then he's going to have good stats. And that's exactly what happened with Kelvin Benjamin. So when we looked at the Carolina Panthers last year and we're at the Football Guys Roundtable and Marl poses the question, you know, should we count on any of these guys? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, because if you go by the theorem from last year the theorem is Cam Newton's going to keep throwing to somebody. Who's that guy going to be? It's going to be the guy who is going to drop at least one touchdown a game and catch at least one touchdown a game. And that's Ted Ginn. That's been Ted Ginn throughout his entire career. And so he's kind of a faster version of Golden Tate. Like, I used to watch them in college, and they don't catch the ball the way they're supposed to, but then they make plays despite that bad technique in situations where you go, wow, that was a great play. I can't ignore how good this player can be at certain moments. He's just never going to be consistent. And Ted Ginn is that guy for you. And if you're looking at all these scenarios where you can't trust the quarterback, you can't trust the health of the player, you can't trust the matchup, then you got to look to Atlanta and realize that Atlanta has good cornerbacks, but at the same time, Ted Ginn riddled them just a month ago, and he was a great play. And I think there's more of the same that would be in store this week. Atlanta may not have they may not have the breakdown that gets Ted Ginn that second touchdown, but you betcha that Cam Newton is going to go up top to Ted Ginn at least 3 times in this game, and that should give you an opportunity for him to grab one big play for you.
And what you're seeing here is also Cam Newton's progress as a passer this year. And just as a quarter, not just specifically the point when he decides to throw and how well he throws it and accuracy, but just the way he manages the field and the way he's maximizing opportunities for his offense. What a year for Cam Newton. And like you said, without Kelvin Benjamin, and with Devin Funchess still embryonic, very exciting. Imagine if Jonathan Stewart can actually stay healthy, but they're doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing, but they're doing the right thing, saving him. It's so funny because this is one of those you don't care about my team things. But like 2 or 3 years ago, when I was done with Jonathan Stewart, I think it was Chad Parsons, one of our staffers. He and I swapped Jonathan Stewart for Doug Baldwin. Like I gave up Stewart. I was like, fine. I'm ready to get rid of him. And for a good while, I was like, man, I blew that one. And then, Doug Baldwin happened.
I still think they should have kept D'Angelo, but that's my.
Yeah, well, I think D'Angelo's showing that probably that would have been the better call, although both of these guys are starting to play well now.
Yeah.
Packers-Seahawks we have not touched on yet. And, Gene, I'll throw it to you. This is a larger – Packers-Seahawks, Packers-Cardinals. Packers-Cardinals. And, Gene, you can add in some color. We're going to go just a couple minutes over here. Add in some color and background about that very interesting Cardinals defense. We've been covering it on the IDP show since before the season started. The way that they deploy their personnel. We know what the Packers have had trouble with. We know what Aaron Rodgers has had trouble with. And again, this is something I was saying during the shows this week with Cecil. How could we get to a point where it's week 16 and you're saying, the 2 top quarterbacks we were drafting were Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers, right? And we're saying, yeah, you'd rather not trust any Colts. Is it also, you'd rather not trust any Packers this week either?
Not as much as the Colts. No.
Sure.
I think anytime Aaron Rodgers is on the field, there are enough weapons there. The running backs are getting a little bit healthier. It's a road game is the reason that you don't trust Rodgers much, but there's going to be points in this game. This is not. I don't really think this is going to be a 17-10 situation. I know we've said that a lot this year and it hasn't come true, but I really think this is a situation where there's going to be lots of touchdowns, and Aaron Rodgers has as much upside as anybody else does this week, including Ben Roethlisberger. Now the floor is a lot riskier, and maybe you don't know where the production is going to come from, whether it's going to be passes to Starks and Rodgers, or whether this is the week Cobb and Jones break out, or a lesser player. But I would trust Rodgers this week unless I had Newton,
Sure,
Roethlisberger, Wilson, yeah,
Palmer side of the matchup.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily a situation where you absolutely 100% have to dance with the girl you brought, but I'm not looking for reasons not to start Rodgers today unless I have a clearly other strong option.
We'll move on to the Sunday night game and then put a bow on this one, since we did talk about the Bengals and the Broncos, and that's not the game where you want to be looking for guys. Like if I'm down by 17 and I have something, the Monday night game, unless it's like the Bengals, the Broncos defense, I'm not sure if it's going to come through for you. We do have a game tonight, Giants and Vikings. No Odell Beckham. Some might say justice, some might say injustice, but we live with whatever conditions we're given. Matt, is there a Giant that you say, okay, I will turn to Rashad Jennings, I will turn to Shane Vereen, I will turn to Ruben Randall, Will Tye? Is there any obvious play here, or is it more like so much air goes out of the balloon that this is going to possibly be disastrous?
I think that, God, I hate to even bring up this name, but I have to, is Ruben Randall. I think that you have to consider Ruben Randall just by the sheer fact that Eli's going to target him deep, and he'll occasionally hit some. Ruben Randall is what most people think of Ted Ginn when they're afraid of Ted Ginn, and no way I'm playing Ted Ginn, but I think that Ruben Randall is kind of a poor man's Ted Ginn. Wow, that's a statement right there. But yeah, I would say that's a guy I would consider as a flex play if you need him.
Volume. We'll see about the volume. Although the problem is, we can even add Dwayne Harris to the mix. Even without Odell Beckham, that's still 5 players that can soak up touches. And unfortunately, I don't think the Vikings are going to be in any hurry to run away with this game. Try to get Adrian Peterson 30 carries if his ankle holds up. So that might not put urgency on Eli Manning to go in garbage time mode like he did. I think it was against Washington. He was down 20-0. He's had a couple of games this year, the Carolina game, where once the game seems like it's over, then he comes alive. It's going to be tough. Hopefully, all of your teams come alive at the right time. But if you have a team still going, or you're just enjoying this wonderful day of football and the break and everything you've had going on in your life, I hope this Sunday treats you well. Our Sundays treat us very well, at least in part because you give us this wide berth to do our thing. I'm going to miss you guys. We're gonna have to have hangouts on Sunday mornings just because, like just while we're drinking.
We're going to have one in a couple weeks.
Yes, with some basketball among other things. Yeah, Vegas. I always want to. It's funny. I always want to say we're going to do a hangout or a podcast from Vegas, and then so we could. No, come on. We're not. We're not. Stories might be told, and for those of you that occasionally drop in and we'll have lunch in Austin or something like that, you might even get to hear some stories. But it's been a wonderful journey. I think that every year we feel like we learn things, but we also are humbled again, and we get closer as we each iteration. And of course, again, playoffs, draft, coaching changes, free agency, the RSP. If you hung out with us with any of these, or you're listening to the show after, and you're not getting the RSP, I don't know how else to convince you to do that.
Well, I'll just let everyone know too, and I appreciate that. There's an early bird that I heard a rumor that an early bird special will be available this coming week, probably Monday or Tuesday. So stay tuned for an announcement about that.
Yeah, it's just, who would not want to be able to dwell in 1,000+ pages of Matt Baldwin's mind? I know I would. I know I look forward to it every week. Don't laugh, Gene.
I'm laughing. That's scary.
It's where you are every day, and you all have been so fantastic to join us. These hangouts have been something that is very gratifying for us, and I hope it continues to be gratifying for you. And for those of you that are especially joining us live, if there's anything we can ever do to make this more useful to you or better, please let us know. So this will be our last hangout for the 2015 season. But we know the pages turn, the story keeps going, and we love hearing from all of you. If anything, on Twitter, I'll be more present and more active because I won't be doing my 70-hour weeks that I do during the season. So we love talking football, talking life with everybody out there, and I hope everybody brings home the hardware. And even if you don't, it's certainly a fun thing to watch all these things unfold as part of your story and not just their story. It's all of our story. And one last quick note, I'll end on this note, because we talk a lot on this show about how we all touch each other. And the emails we keep coming in and the messages we exchange back and forth, it's so much bigger than fantasy football, this community, and what we provide for each other. Thomas Rawls, our man Thomas Rawls, there's a really beautiful story, really touching. My hair's getting a little tingly thinking about it. If you haven't seen it, where Thomas Rawls, we all know, we've chronicled Thomas Rawls on this show. What a moment for him to go down. What a moment for him as he's really starting to soar as an NFL player to go down. And he said that he was in a very bad place. He was really down. And he saw a video of a little girl opening up her Christmas present. It was his jersey, and she just lost it. This is the greatest thing ever. I get a Thomas Rawls jersey, and it instantly snapped him out of it. And there's a beautiful story, you can look it up, of him he needed to find her. He's just like, I need to find her. And he found her, and she was blown away and floored. But this wasn't just like, I'm going to do a favor for you. This was Thomas Rawls going to this person and said, you're very meaningful to me, right? What you did to me when I saw that brought me back, and they shared a moment that was really beautiful. And I think as much as we can, as we go through our lives, those are the moments that we're trying to create, and occasionally we do. And I hope that we can continue to facilitate that process and maybe get some fantasy football wins along the way, or someone to blame when it goes so very wrong. So here's to your Week 16, here's to your 2015, and to your 2016. Cecil and I will be back with a preview this week, and then we'll see you on the flip side. Stay classy, everyone.